Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Stock. I'm here in the music department at the University of Chicago, and I'm so pleased to be here welcoming Quince Ensemble and welcoming everyone to Quince's performance of David Lang's vocal ensemble work Love Fail from 2012, which they've recently released as a recording on Innova. So everybody should go check that album out. It's very good. Hi Quince, how are you all doing? How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I know some of you are in, or I guess you're all in Chicago right now, which is not very glamorous at the moment. It's pretty dreary, but
It was beautiful just a couple days ago, though.
that's true. And hopefully it'll be beautiful again with springtime coming. So um, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go through your introduction, do your little official bio, and then maybe we can go around and you can get all introduce yourselves individually.
Lovely.
So singing with the precision and flexibility of modern chamber musicians, Quince Ensemble is changing the paradigm of contemporary vocal music. Described as the anonymous four of new music by Opera News, Quince continually pushes the boundaries of vocal ensemble literature. As dedicated advocates of new music, Quince regularly commissions new works, providing wider exposure for the music of living composers. They recently launched the Quince New Music Commissioning Fund, a fund to grow the repertoire for women and treble voices. Quince has released 4 studio albums called Realign the Time, Hushers, Motherland, and David Lang's Love Fail, which are all available on iTunes, CD Baby, Spotify, Bandcamp, and Amazon. In 2016, Quince was featured on the Cody Festival Lublin, Poland, in collaboration with David Lang and Beth Morrison Project. They have also appeared on the Outpost concert series, the Philip Glass Music with Friends concert at Issue Project Room in Brooklyn, Alia Musica, and the Sonic Festival in New York. Current and recent engagements include Chicago Symphony Music Now, Boston Conservatory, the Schubert Club, and UC Davis, to name a few. Comprised of vocalists Liz Peirce, Kaylee Butcher, Amanda DeBoer Bartlett, and Carrie Henneman Shaw, Quince thrives on unique musical challenges and genre-bending contemporary repertoire. So that's your cue. Those are all of your names. I'd love to hear from you the informal version of your sort of individual introductions.
Should we go in alpha order, or can I just
You can
go?
go around. You can start, and maybe Kaylee, you can start, and Liz can go, and then we can go around.
Sure. So I'm Kaylee Butcher. I am the mezzo soprano, the only mezzo soprano, as I like to say, even though Liz has basically the same range as me, plus some on the top. But I'm the mezzo soprano, the lowest voice of the group typically, and I'm also the executive director of Quince Ensemble.
And I'm Liz Peirce. You pronounced my name right. That's really exciting. Thank you. And I am a soprano. I'm based in rural Minnesota, and I do most of the programming for the ensemble.
Hi, I'm Amanda DeBoer Bartlett. I'm based in Omaha. I'm one of the sopranos of the group.
I'm Carrie Shaw, and I'm based in Seattle currently.
Awesome, thank you all. I'm so happy to be getting a chance to chat with you all about this piece, and to give our audience a chance to get to know you, get to know a little bit about the piece, and yeah, just to give a sort of, I'll let you give most of the background to the piece, but it's a piece about love fail. It's an apt description in the title. And I know it is at some level a reflection on the story of Tristan and Isolde, which I know some of our concert-going, music-loving audiences will be familiar with from Wagner. And I'm interested to hear some reflections from you all about sort of the genesis of the piece, what brought you into contact with it, and sort of what turned you on to this piece, what made you want to do it, sort of the origin story of your involvement with this work.
I think that's a programmer question.
So Quince started singing together in 2010, 2011-ish, were our first couple concerts. And at the time, there was not a ton of contemporary living repertoire for chamber treble voices. There's tons of repertoire from the 16th, 17th century, maybe earlier, but there's not a lot from, say, 1900 onward. And we wanted to sing together. When Kaylee and Amanda sort of formed the group, they wanted to do something that they were in charge of, that they had the ability to choose the music, to kind of chart our own course. And the Kaylee, Amanda, and I we met each other at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio. And in 2012, David Lang was the guest composer at the festival. I think it was 2012, right?
Sounds right.
2011, 2012, one of the two. And right about that time in 2012 was when he had written Love Fail for Anonymous 4, this sort of venerable chamber treble quartet that had been singing together for maybe 15, 20 years at that point. And, when we heard the recording of this piece, when the studio album came out, it was just amazing. And it was this whole sort of down-tempo, very comforting, very beautiful writing for treble voices. And my thought was, yes, I want to perform this. When can we perform that? And there was a matter of exclusivity, meaning only Anonymous 4 was allowed to perform the piece until, I think on David Lang's website, it listed it under exclusivity until 2015, 2016, one of the two. And I contacted their publisher and was told, they are retiring, so after they retire, we'll make it available. And they did, and we immediately sort of begged for a perusal score to look at it and to sing through it to see if it was something that we could do. And we fell in love with it at a residency in New Hampshire at Avalock Farm Music Institute. And we read it down, sort of had a big group cry about it because it was really good, and decided we need to do this and sort of put it out in the world that we wanted to perform this piece. And then spring 2016, we were contacted by Beth Morrison Projects, one of sort of David Lang's producers, asking us if we would be available to perform it that year in Poland. And we said, yes, yeah, we'll make ourselves available. I didn't remember until recently, we'd planned a concert at Lil Street Arts Center for that week. So we were already going to be together, and it just worked out really well. We had to emergency schedule time to meet with David to coach the piece, which happened to be Easter Sunday 2016, when Amanda was in New York already performing Stockhausen. Carrie was in the midst of just recovering from knee surgery, so she was having to scoot up the stairs to his apartment on her hands. And yeah, so we hustled to put it together, but we've had 5 years with the piece now, and it's just been wonderful. It feels like home for us.
That's great. That's a crazy story about scooting up to the rehearsals. Yeah, you don't wish that for your first encounter with a piece, but you got to do what you got to do.
There's video evidence of this.
Oh no. Well, yeah. That's how it is sometimes, I guess. But that said, I know that Quince usually is kind of a long distance group, right? So I know you're all based in different places, and that this piece, for instance, this is about an hour-long piece, I think. So in terms of the rehearsal process and in terms of your collaboration with the composer, finding this time and learning this piece, which is, a kind of extensive process on that kind of quick turnaround of like, okay, maybe we have just a couple days to get together and work on a piece where we actually are in the same place and where we can actually be in the same space as David Lang working on this. What was that process like, the collaboration, the rehearsals, things like that?
Well, like Liz said, we spent some time with the piece at a residency in New Hampshire, not necessarily having a plan in place to perform it. So we had spent some time absorbing it, being together for about 5 days, immersing ourselves in the piece. And then it was frantic before our first performance. But since then, we tend to get together for 2 residency rehearsal weeks per year. And those are just rehearsal weeks where we're only working on new music, we're preparing for concerts, and we're not performing. So most of those residencies, we would carve out time for things like, developing some of the movements of Love Fail. And then we performed it a lot. We did a tour. We did, I think, 2 tours of the piece where we had 4 or 5 performances each. So we've just lived with the piece for a long time. By the time we recorded it, we'd performed it probably 10 or 15 times. And during the recording process, it seeped into our marrow. It's such a difficult piece to tune. It's so exposed with the harmonically. So thankfully we had a good producer, and we just became perfectionists about that process while we were recording. So now I feel like we could, wake up after our second COVID shot and perform it fine.
Let me also say that we recorded it with when Amanda was, what, 8 months pregnant?
7.
Well?
I'm not that. I'm
7.
not that
Oh, okay.
ridiculous.
I
Still
mean,
ridiculous.
still. So, but by that point, it was, like Amanda said, pretty secondhand to us in the best way.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Amanda, you were talking about the kind of harmonic clarity of the piece, which I think of as a kind of David Lang trademark in a sense that, there's this harmonically very exposed, as you're saying, exposed, but also very kind of beautiful and clear aspect about the pitch. And one thing that strikes me about this piece, and maybe about Lang in general, is that if you look at the music, like if you look at the score, it seems simple, right? There is a kind of clarity about it, but there are all these like little ways that the music moves in these like quirky kind of rhythmic ways. And so I'm interested to hear you speak to some of the, whether they're about the rhythm or not, but speak to some of the challenges of rehearsing this piece or performing this piece.
One of the challenges has to do with the nature of Quince as an ensemble, which is that we are not trying to sound like a choir. We want to sound like a chamber ensemble. We want to sound like 4 different people who are singing together. So finding the balance of blending into each other's sound while not completely removing all of the individual personality from our voices, that's a balance that we're constantly trying to find. And this piece makes it particularly challenging with all of the sort of open fifths. One of the things that the piece does, which is really fun, and I think we tend to like pieces like this, is that it will move from a more muddy, clustery sound into a really clear sound sometimes, where you're going from like a major or minor second or a cluster of some kind, and then suddenly you're on an open fifth, something like that. And so those were some of the fun challenges for us, like how do we balance a cluster and then move into something super pure like a fifth, something like that. I don't Does someone else want to talk about particular harmonic challenges that stick out to them?
Carrie, I feel like you should take a little bit of this one.
I hesitate to talk because my internet connection is really unstable. I only hear about every third word you're saying right now. So I'm sorry. I will listen.
Oh, we hear
Well,
you. Sorry, we
another
hear you fine.
another thing that you mentioned, the rhythm. And something that is challenging about this piece is that every moment is so beautiful, but it can move really quickly sometimes. So you only have, the span of an eighth note to land perfectly on like a major triad or something. And it feels really ephemeral. Like you look at it on the page and it seems really solid. It seems like, church writing, like you're going to open up your glory and praise hymnal at the Catholic Church. Like it looks that clear, but it moves so quickly in and out of these harmonies that it can be kind of deceptively challenging. You're muted, Liz.
Oh, so another thing that I think, if you're not a vocalist, it can be hard to kind of know the difficulty of nailing something like this. The laying, there are moments of repetition of the same pitches over and over, and with like you said, these kind of detailed changes, and all human musicianship is rooted in the human body, and humans. It's physically impossible for us to do the exact same thing twice. Every moment changes, and with voice being, the physical instrument is rooted inside our body. Every moment is different, and so trying to do the same thing in almost exactly the same way over time, it will always result in these micro changes, these different sounds in the voice. And for something with these cluster chords, voices, like if it were a barbershop quartet, there's certain types of tuning in terms of where the third lands and how every chord sounds to tune the chord. And when we're singing these clusters, these things are rooted in even temperament, like a piano. It almost feels as if we're like floating in the vapor, in the fog somehow, trying to figure out, like, well, what is the proper tuning for this? If it's four whole steps in a row, how is that supposed to sound? What are going to be the tendencies of that, rather than being rooted in tonal harmony, where we know the third does this, the seventh might do this a little bit. Um, and so we've spent a lot of time saying, okay, well, what happens if one of us pitches up a little or down a little, and finding sort of a new harmonic language through these repetitions.
And then doing it, yeah, for 8 minutes straight.
And then, yeah, exactly.
Without needing to cough or swallow.
Right. That's the other part of something like this with these sort of sustained, clear passages is human bodies, there are fluids, and we swallow, we sometimes inhale a feather or a bug. And then there's moments of, uh-oh. Whoops.
That did not happen to any of us.
Never ever happens. We're lucky.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that like Amanda was saying, there's this kind of flow about the music, that it's always kind of like on the move, and the places where it's static really stand out in this piece. And I think almost of a similar, I don't know, maybe analogical divide between these moments in the story, which is in some ways very fragmentary in this piece, right? It's partly about the Tristan and Isolde narrative, and it's interspersed with these moments which are more meditations on contemporary love and contemporary relationships. And so you have this flow of a kind of narrative, which is, to many people experiencing the piece, probably very familiar, interspersed with things that hit closer to home. Can you speak to some of that and people's responses to that?
The one that pops out in my brain is actually the duo between Carrie and I, and I'm blanking on what it's called. What is it
Right
called?
and Wrong.
Right and Wrong, where it talks about, I mean, another one is Forbidden Subjects, which I think Amanda should talk about, but the Right and Wrong is really about a conversation about non-conversations, conversations that you're not really supposed to have, a right and a wrong conversation between two people in a relationship, and how um, there are sometimes ways that you can um, I don't know, navigate the relationship in a right way and a wrong way, and sometimes that changes and sometimes it doesn't. But it strikes home so much for me as someone who, I mean, I think we're all in kind of committed relationships at the moment, so it makes a lot of sense for us to sing something like this, where it really feels so much like we've all been there. It's not just the Tristan and Isolde story. It is just as relevant then as it is now, these conversations that people in relationships will have with each other, things that you are able to talk about and things that you're not able to talk about. And with that, I'll hand it over to Amanda.
Sure. In terms of the storytelling of the piece, something that I think makes this piece kind of evergreen is that there's no bad guy, there's no good guy. It's just about how complicated it is to try to relate to someone and to try to connect, and how do you maintain that? How does that sustain over time? And that's maybe reflective of the things we were talking about harmonically, is that it feels like you have a nice moment, but you can't sustain something forever. So it's just this series of intense moments. And what makes the piece nice, have this nice arc, I think, is that David Lang and Lydia Davis is the poet, um, besides David Lang, who created the text for the piece. And they're both so dry and almost clinical. Um, and in a way, David Lang's compositional process can feel kind of clinical. It's not, but when he talks about it, when he analyzes it, it's like this series of phasing kinds of gestures, things like that. It feels clinical, so that when there is suddenly a kind of cathartic moment, it has so much power. Like Head Heart is one of those cathartic movements, and The Wood and the Vine. Like there's so much dry humor, dry angst throughout the piece, that when there's finally these big, really lush moments, they hit that much more strongly. And Forbidden Subjects is one of the funny movement. I suppose it's like things that you're not allowed to talk about, like dogs, music, certain universities, how much money you make, things like that become kind of off limit topics in a relationship, um, when they become contentious. But then over time, if you work at it, you can start to open up these pathways of conversation again. It it feels really dry, but people always laugh when we perform it. I think it works.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite narrative moments of the piece. The sense that there are things about your relationship that you can't really control that just become routine, um, but that maybe you can work to sort of open up those pathways of communication again. It's kind of a heartening thought.
I'll say something really short because I don't know how long it'll be stable, but um, I think, the Tristan story, you think about it as being sort of star-crossed lover type situation, or, people who are fated to be in love, but also to suffer disappointment. And I think um, the the idea of there being a magic elixir that solves the problem of wrong love, when you think about it for a minute, you start to think about the way that you are drugging yourself in your own life to like survive the disappointments, to survive the shortcomings of whatever relationship you're in. If it's that you're drugging yourself to say, well, we just won't talk about this, or you know uh, I'm with somebody who has to control everything I'm doing all the time, or I want to control the person I'm with all the time. And it makes sense because we're in love and that's how this is supposed to be. Everyone's drinking some sort of Kool-Aid. And I think that's part of what the elixir idea is that we live in that Kool-Aid. So anyway.
Yeah, I know there are these moments in the piece. There's a divide in a sense between the big, long, lush movements of the piece. Amanda was mentioning, like Wood and the Vine is this long, lush, you know, highlight movement. But there are also these little, what David Lang calls breaks in the piece, right? And there's one movement in particular that's a break, which interests me for the way it sort of brings together his sort of musical concerns and the narrative concerns we've been talking about with respect to the impossibility of stretching something out. There's this special instrument that one of you plays, and I wonder if one of you wants to speak to that special instrument and the process of learning it and why it's there.
I was really curious of which movement you were going to say. Um, the special amazing instrument is the conch shell, which I play. I forget which break number it is. Break number 2, maybe? Something like that. It's later on in the piece. It's. I wish I could find the score. Do you remember what it says in the score?
It says not heroic. Sustain until the sound is unusable or unstable and broken.
That's it. So essentially, you play the conch shell until you completely run out of air. So it almost sounds a little bit, vaudevillian, like comical. Someone tripped and fell, slipped on a banana or something, and it's like until you completely run out. So It sounds heroic at first because you're using all of your air to make, the longest, in my case, like audible sound, because that's all I'm going for. I don't really know how to play it. And then all of a sudden it just kind of dissipates and dissipates and falls
In
apart
a not pretty way.
in a not pretty way. And I hope people know that I while I can't play it, I do mean to do that. It is written in the score.
Well, and David mentioned in an interview that we did with him that it's supposed to be reflective of a shofar, which is a Jewish used in Jewish religious ceremonies. So it has this connotation of being like both like a failure, but also like deeply personal.
Yeah, I
I
wonder.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say the first time I saw the score and I was like, I when Kaylee the last one Kaylee did in our recording session was just juicy and like just a really unfortunate sound at the end, and we're like, I think that was it. I think that's what he's going for. But and because for me the sound always signified sort of a relation, like, the beginning of a relationship is almost always good, like, yay, everything's wonderful. And then sometimes if you try to hold on to it for too long, because not every relationship was meant to last, you get these unfortunate things that happen more and more and more until it just dies. And that's the sound of a failing relationship to me, is that conch blast. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know, Kaylee, you were saying that you really don't know how to play it, and that's part of the, the sort of desired effect of the thing. What, I mean, you do play it in the piece though, so what was the process of learning, or how is it that you go about actually making that sound?
Sure. Well, this is now my turn to shout out another Chicago group, which is the guys in Third Coast Percussion gave me a couple lessons on it. Specific shout out to Sean Connors, who helped me find one online that actually has like a beeswax
Mouthpiece.
mouthpiece, to help me a little bit, to sort of funnel and the stream in a very specific way, so that I'm not learning how to do it on this kind of hard, um, rough, sharp part of the shell. So I guess you know what? It's not cheating.
You learned how to play it.
I learned
You're
how to
selling
play it.
yourself short.
So I found that online because of Sean, and Sean gave me a couple lessons once I got it, about how to use the breath support. And I mean, it's really just a big burst of air. There's not a whole lot of pitch control. There's a sort of limited range with it. But yeah, shout out to them for helping me out with that particular instrument.
Great. Well, shout out to them. I think maybe this will be my last question about this is, you've had Love Fail in your repertoire now for a few years. You've brought it as far as, committing it to record. And now you're in sort of a new phase of the piece's life, or your relationship to the piece in a sense. Um, can you speak a little bit to how you feel, or if you feel that your relationship to this piece has changed over time, and where you sort of see it going? Does it fulfill a certain programming niche for you? Are you, do you have favorite movements that have changed? Anything that sort of has changed about your feeling about the piece as you bring it forward past your recording process?
Yeah, I'm happy to cede the floor to anyone else, but I think over time the piece has really become, like I said, sort of home for us. We've created programs since that have a through narrative, as opposed to the sort of potpourri of this piece by this person, this piece by this person, and they're sort of related but not, but tangentially. Um, this is sort of the first evening length experience we were a part of, and it does feel so much like home. We sing it together, and it's like life makes sense for an hour. We know it's expected, and we can really live in the sound world of this piece. Um, in terms of going forward, it's something that we're really excited to get to present. And for presenters who don't, we often run into the problem of presenters who don't know what we mean when we say we're a contemporary chamber voice ensemble. And sometimes the closest we can get is saying it's kind of like a string quartet, but with voices. And because there's not this model of chamber voice quartet that's common, people don't always want to take a chance on that if it's a presenter who doesn't know us very well. And so, but when we say we have this piece by David Lang, often if presenters know a contemporary composer, he's part of a very short list that's pretty well nationally, worldwide known. They sort of know what to expect with his music. Not that it's all the same, but that it occupies a sound world and a sort of ethos that is immediately something an audience can grasp and is always compelling. So it's something that to introduce us to new audiences, it's a really good place to start sometimes, if that makes sense.
To the question about what our favorite movements are, I feel like this is actually a conversation that we have all the time, and it changes all the time.
Yeah.
Like originally, my favorite movement was I think the 10th or 11th movement, the I Live in Pain. That one always just sort of speaks to me. But now I would say that it's the last movement, Mild Light.
Really?
Yeah, I really love just honestly, I think it's because singing it is so fun and because we are such four very different voices, the fact that we can blend on that piece, we worked really hard on that blend.
To sing in
So
unison is not an easy task for us.
for four very different voices. So it feels amazing to sing that piece. And that we get to play instruments periodically on certain movements. That's really fun, and we don't always get to do that. Um, so yeah, that it changes all the time, and we want it to because it keeps having meaning for us.
Yeah, that moment, that's my favorite movement too. I think at the end, that moment where you all sing together for the first time is so sort of striking and cathartic. So, it's been a pleasure to talk with you all. We'll look forward to hearing those moments at the streaming concert. And yeah, I'm so looking forward to hearing your performance. And I know everyone is, uh, waiting with bated breath to get the inside scoop on Modern Love. So thank you all so much. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Andrew.
much.
Thanks so much, Andrew, and thanks to Jessica and Amy and everybody at University of Chicago Presents for letting us show this piece and share it with you guys. Thank you.